Today I'm going to go over a very famous chess game played in the 1970 Herceg Novi Blitz tournament. And this game is played between Viktor Korchnoi, who is white, and Bobby Fischer, who is black. Fischer is a very famous chess player, noted to be probably one of the best, if not the best, chess player from America. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. After d4, we have knight to f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop plays bishop g7, e4, d6, and bishop e2. So here Fischer is basically playing the King's Indian defense, classical main line. After castles, we see knight f3, e5, castles, and knight c6. Then comes d5, knight e7, and knight d2. So white is essentially swinging his pieces over to the queen side to attack over here. Since white has more space on the queen side, it makes more sense to attack here, and black is going to focus on attacking on the king side. So after knight d2, Fischer first tries to restrict white's space grab by playing c5. If white is able to move again, he'll play something like b4 and then c5, so Fischer looks to limit white's counterplay on the queen side and plays c5 right away. Korchnoi responds with a3, knight e8, b4, and again b6, trying to limit counterplay. Rook b1, f5. f5 is a great move, counter-attacking on the king's side. White responds with f3, trying to maintain his pawn structure, and Fischer plays f4, which is an excellent move, getting space on the king's side. Since black has more space over here, it will be easier for him to attack on the king's side, and white's going to have a little bit harder of a time mobilizing his pieces to defend on the king's side because he has less space over here. So his pieces will be more cramped and it'll be harder for them to maneuver around. But white's pieces will do much better on the queen side. So white looks to the queen side and plays a4 here. After a4, Fischer responds with g5, and then we get a5. And the idea is to open up even more lines on the queen side. Fischer responds with rook f6, which is a good move. It defends d6, which is the weakest point in black's pawn structure, and it also will play an instrumental role in attacking on the king side. Now at this point in the game, we have already reached the critical moment. How should white capture on the queen side? Often in chess we have these pawn chains, and we could open up the c file or the d file, and sometimes we wonder, does it really matter which file I open up, or which file is best to open up, or really which piece should I capture with first? And so we're going to go ahead and take a look at this. In the actual game, white played b takes c5, which is a mistake. Fischer took back with the b pawn, and now white doesn't get very much counterplay at all. The b file is heavily guarded by black's pieces, so white is not able to attack down the b file or get any type of counterplay down this way. Not to mention, the a5 pawn is pretty weak. White could have taken on b6, which would have been better. Take on b6 first, and then when Fischer captures back, takes c5, pawn takes, and now white has both the b and the a file to play around with. So white would have better chances here and could generate more counterplay since you would have both files to work with. And the a file is not as heavily guarded as the b file is. Not to mention, by trading off both pawns, or pawns on both files, white could get a knight to b5, and it would be much harder for black to chase this knight away. If we take a step back and we look at this position, when white takes back on c5 and black takes with the b pawn, even though white could get a knight to b5 here, black can always chase it away with a move like a6, so the knight is not as secure there. Not to mention a5 is weak, so white ends up bringing an important resource over to defend a pawn and doesn't get to attack as much as he would like to. So after the knight moves to b3, we see rook g6 continuing the attack, bishop d2, knight f6, king h1 getting out of the g file, g4 has been played, f takes g4, and that is pretty much the forced. Let's go ahead and look at why. If white were to play some other move, maybe moving the bishop back to e1, then black would play g3, and we see that white's king doesn't have very far to run. The king is very cramped here. And if white tries to just completely lock up the position with h3, well, it doesn't quite work because black has sacrificed the bishop for that pawn and then play g2 with a crushing attack, winning back the material, and white's king is very limited. This f4 pawn controls both the e3 and g3 square, making it hard for white's king to run. So that would have been really good for black. If instead white tries maybe king out to g1, then black can keep the pawn there, play something like knight h5, and just keep building up on the pawn. There are other ideas. Could take on h2, of course, and try to attack down the h file. And white's king is going to have a very difficult time running away because of all of these white pieces that are in its way and because of how much space black has. So that would have been a very uncomfortable position for white. Therefore, taking on g4 is best to play for an active defense. So after f takes g4, we see knight takes g4, rook f3, rook h6 attacking h2, so h3 is played. Then we see knight out to g6, king g1. So now getting out of the pen of this rook on the king, so the pawn could take the knight, therefore black now retreats the knight. Knight f6, then we see bishop out to e1, knight h8, rook to d3, knight to f7, and here Fischer is basically maneuvering this knight around to attack this very weak pawn on h3. So the knight is going to be heading into g5. It does put more pressure on e4, but the key point is this h3 weakness that black managed to provoke several moves back. And that is what black is going to go after in this game. White defended against that, or tried to with bishop f3, but this does interfere with the rook's ability to defend h3, which makes h3 weaker. A slightly better defense would have been to play h4 to stop knight g5, and this does get rid of the h3 weakness by simply moving the pawn. So that would have been a better defense. But instead, after bishop f3, we see knight g5 being played, then queen e2, trying to bring the queen closer to help defend the king side. Black plays rook g6, threatening knight takes h3 with check. The pawn can't take because the rook is on the king. So here white tries king out to f1 and tries to make a run for it. Unfortunately, this is the wrong move and loses fairly quickly. White could have tried to hold on with king out to h2. After king h2, we might see something like queen d7 with ideas of knight takes pawn, pawn takes back, and then queen takes h3 with checkmate. Therefore, queen f1 must be played to defend the h3 square, and we see that black's pieces are just much better placed. So that would have allowed white to last longer, but black still has a pretty good game. Instead, we see king f1, knight takes h3. After pawn takes back, we see bishop takes h3 with a huge attack. The king must come up to f2. The entire g file is controlled by black's rook. If white were to try a move like bishop to g2, simply take back After queen takes, black could take the queen, and after king takes, we see that black has one rook for a rook, 2 minor pieces trade off, and essentially white has a rook and a bishop versus a black queen. So that would mean black would be up by a pawn in that exchange. Not to mention, black is also up with the h pawn and the f pawn with the safer king, better placed pieces over here on the king side, and white's king is still wide open. So that would have been a winning position for Fischer. He would probably be up by at least 3 pawns there. Alright, so let's go ahead and set these pieces back up. Pieces right there. We had a rook here. Okay, so instead of playing bishop back to g2, we see king f2 to king f2, knight g4 check, and white took the knight in the actual game, but let's look at what happens if he tries to run with the king to the corner. Well, then we see knight with a discovered check, and if king takes the knight, queen h4 would be a checkmate, so that's not possible. Therefore, king h2 would be played, and then black has simply grabbed this rook, so he's not down as much material. Now have a bishop for a bishop, and basically a rook for 2 knights, plus 2 extra pawns, so black is up by at least a pawn here with a devastating attack. You might see something like queen out to g5, and it's difficult to meet all of these possible threats of rook h6 or queen g1 check, so that would be winning. Let's go ahead and back up. So after we see this knight check, white went ahead and took the knight. Black takes back with the bishop, and here white resigned. He has a losing position, and it's going to be checkmate here pretty soon. If, let's just say, maybe something like queen out to f1, then we would have this queen h4 check. After king g1, something like bishop e2 with a discovered check would be enough. And maybe white could try queen out to d2. Well, if queen d2, then simply queen h4 check, king g8, something like bishop, maybe bishop out to e2 with a discovered check. That would also work, and this would be completely winning. White would have to give up material to try and escape any checkmates. So thank you for watching, and this was a really great game played by Fischer at the 1970 Novi